So on this edition of the Heel to the Face podcast, during AEW's show last night, I wasn't watching live, but Brandon Clements over there, he made sure that I wasn't in the dark on the big secret. AEW and HBO Max are together finally. Brandon, are you excited?
I'm so pumped.
AEW?
I'm so ready for it. I saw the preview for it. I'm like, this is going to be the best thing ever.
All sarcasticness aside, though, Mike Tyson, HBO, both a part of AEW. Mike Tyson trying to get back in the ring. Could be a match made in heaven when it comes to promotion's sake. We'll talk about that and much more. Roll the intro as the Heel to the Face podcast starts now.
So silence your cell phones. Hold your applause. And tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So the Heel to the Face podcast is officially on the air for what will be the final time in the month of May 2020, as we're joined as always with Brandon Clements. You can find him on Twitter at Icebreaker21, myself at KRock Jared on Twitter and Instagram. Most importantly, the show at Heel to the Face on Twitter, and make sure to follow us and find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. A lot to talk about, mostly All Elite Wrestling as that dominated the landscape this week. WWE probably dominated the landscape by copying something from All Elite Wrestling, but we're going to obviously start with AEW. We'll start with Dynamite after what was a Dynamite Double or Nothing pay-per-view just the other night. But how do they top that off the night or a couple nights after their big pay-per-view? The Revival, known as FTR, makes their official debut in All Elite Wrestling. I know Brandon, he's pretty excited about that because he's been a huge Revival fan from day one, or day one-ish.
Day one-ish, yes, day one-ish. I'll tell you right now, man, I DVR'd it a little bit later. I don't like to watch it so live because of commercials and stuff, so I got into it a little bit later than, Twitterverse going nuts about it. And I hear the motor revving during the tag match with Matt Hardy, the Young Bucks, Private Party, and Joey Janela. In the background, I hear motors revving at the end, and I'm like, what's going on? And they pan out to where Cody did the truck thing recently as well. And as the truck's pulling in, you can get a quick shot, and you're like, holy crap, that's Dax and Cash, formerly the Revival. I was so stoked. It was such a cool moment, and the commentators did a great job. JR, Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, they did a great job of kind of painting the story behind that. It was really cool. And then they come in, they go after Butcher and the Blade, and then have a little stare down with the Bucks, and then off they go. I like what they did because for a minute they had this little standoff. Looked like they're gonna start kicking or in their case start throwing fists. Young Bucks will have a super kick party, but they walked away and they're teasing it. They're selling it for maybe Fyter Fest down the road. I want to get your thoughts on that. I thought that was a really cool moment.
Yeah, Fyter Fest is kind of this unique pay-per-view. They did it last year, and I don't understand it so much. So it is an AEW branded pay-per-view, but they don't brand it or promote it as an AEW pay-per-view. Obviously, you saw the promotion to Double or Nothing were for All Out in September as like their next pay-per-view offering. Fyter Fest still took place last year. It takes place again this year. And Brian Cage, after he won that match, the Casino Chip Ladder match at Double or Nothing, he's going to face Jon Moxley at that pay-per-view. So how do you, let's say, interpret this Fyter Fest pay-per-view? What do you think of it when it comes to AEW's promotion of it?
I think it's kind of I'm looking at your T-shirt, and I see In Your House. We've talked about In Your House recently, the anniversary and whatnot that just happened. So I'm thinking it's kind of like an In Your House kind of in a way. It's not. I don't think it's the traditional pay-per-view that we're typically used to, whether it's AEW, WWE. But I think it's kind of like In Your House. I think it's going to be more intimate, so to speak. I don't know what's going to
Well, I
happen.
remember last year's Fighter Fest, wasn't it from Daly's place? Wasn't it from where they've been shooting all these things? It was our first look into Daly's place, AEW's exclusive home, I guess, if you will, outside of Las Vegas and outside of Chicago, where they hold their bigger events. It's kind of under this circumstance, a very strange situation because of that fact, because everything is intimate in your house style, the way we're in the current landscape of WWE. But I definitely, going back to the Revival, I think the Young Bucks matchup, they were on their side at Dynamite because they don't want that matchup right away, and I don't want to see that matchup right away. You got to build that just a little bit. We want to go down the road and kind of feeding off this being an in-your-house pay-per-view. Would be great to see the Revival make, I guess, their debut in a, warm-up match. I guess, butchering the blade. Not saying it's a warm-up match, but a warm-up when it comes to hard storylines.
I sort of disagree with you on it. I don't even want to see a warm-up match with Butcher and the Blade. I just want to see the Bucks. I want to see FTR. I mean, the Bucks are going to keep wrestling, they might wrestle with Matt Hardy for all we know in these six-man tags. They love Matt Hardy. They looked up to the Hardy Boys, which they alluded to on the broadcast last night. But I think the way you build FTR is you don't unveil them in a match setting until you get to that pay-per-view with the Young Bucks. That would be how I would do it. It'd be a little different. It would kind of
the first match to be with the Young Bucks.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, nothing against Butcher and the Blade. I think they were just kind of, they, in a sense, they were almost like the jobbers in that situation last night. So I don't think it would be good for them to have a quote-unquote tune-up match, with Butcher and the Blade. I would rather see them hold off. Let's get to Fyter Fest, whatever date that is. I don't even think they've announced it yet. And then
I think it's like June 30th-ish.
I don't think they announced it last night, though. They kept talking about Fyter Fest.
It was at Double or Nothing. I believe that they announced when it was like June 30th that was going to be Fyter Fest. I think because it's already scheduled.
I didn't even know because watching
or June, end of June-ish. I'm not sure in June 30, but end of June-ish. That's when it was last year. They had the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. Then they had Fyter Fest sometime in June, and you're like, what is this? Because I thought their next pay-per-view wasn't until All Out. Yeah. And then was their next big AEW branded pay-per-view. Fyter Fest was, I don't really remember. It was what you're describing. It was like they weren't on TV yet, so I guess it felt like the pilot of Dynamite. That's what I guess Fyter Fest felt like last year. It felt like, is the weekly TV show is going to be like? Kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. It's when I was watching AEW last night, I can't remember if it was JR or Tony. One of them talked about Fyter Fest, but there was no date to it. So to me, it kind of sounded odd, like the way they were talking about it, because usually you're like, whatever the pay-per-view is, this date, make sure you tune in on pay-per-view. Like, they got to sell it. It's like, I don't even think they have a date yet, like a date set yet, because I think with the pandemic, I think things are kind of in flux right now. I mean, things are starting to open up. We're getting to different phases throughout the country, and sporting events are, I guess they're starting to get rolling. I mean, I know hockey's turning a new corner where they're about ready. Baseball, we don't know what's going to happen there, but I think what they're doing is they want to see where things really are before they really start pushing it. I don't know. I mean, that's my take on it.
I think it perfect, and I think you'd agree with me. Fyter Fest should be the day they return to live crowds, replace a Dynamite episode, so it's not on pay-per-view. And I believe it's like July 7th when they're in Rochester, New York. I think that'd be a perfect time for Fyter Fest.
I'm on board. Let's do it. I'm still missing that, man. We missed it from a couple months ago, right before the pandemic.
Still scheduled for about a month and a week away. Rochester, it is still scheduled as their return to live crowd. They have nothing scheduled, I guess, for a live crowd prior to that because that was their first event that was postponed. So everything after that has been postponed for the Rochester July 7th, July 8th, and then following. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with WWE as they're still eyeing that SummerSlam. But staying on AEW, Double or Nothing pay-per-view shows what, again, I've been kind of saying all along. Right before WrestleMania got canceled, I said, WrestleMania, if it happens in front of no crowd, is going to suck. Then when WrestleMania happened in front of no crowd, it sucked. And now as time goes on, I feel like it's just proving it even more so. I know you were a big proponent of saying, that this event, was a bigger deal when it happened and people are going to remember it. But now that we're starting to see what you can do without a crowd, AEW didn't have their first pay-per-view event until WWE had two in the bag. And we got to see AEW Double or Nothing pay-per-view during this pandemic. it felt like a pay-per-view. It felt like a big pay-per-view. They weren't. It wasn't from the Performance Center. It wasn't lackluster. There was no jarring in the ring. There wasn't that WrestleMania where they're hip check. All right, 2-2. Come on, guys, pull away from the ropes. It was like atmosphere in the crowd. The announcers talked well over the wrestlers. I wish WWE at WrestleMania could have been pushed a few months down the road. Even if it was still in front of no crowd, even if they had to push it to June and then it was still in front of nobody, I think they would have got the bugs and the kinks out to make it a much better event, because Double or Nothing was a pay-per-view event. It was a good event, regardless, crowd or no crowd. I think I would have been just as entertained.
Yeah, for sure. I think Double or Nothing was fantastic. I would argue that it was probably the best pay-per-view of the year so far. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The main event, when you had the Elite versus Inner Circle, that was fantastic. In the Stadium Stampede, that was fantastic. It was just a great show across the board. I really enjoyed Brody Lee and Moxley. They put on a good show. A couple nice spots in there. I mean, across the board, I mean, it's been a pretty good. It was a pretty good pay-per-view from start to finish. Shida upsets Nyla Rose. It was fun. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing things keep progressing. And obviously, hopefully, we get the crowds back in, because let's be honest, AEW crowds are better than WWE crowds. I mean, even before this whole thing happened, the Dynamites were way more fun. The crowds were way more into it than your Raw and SmackDowns. That's just my take on it.
So of the 4 pre-produced matches that we've seen so far, the Boneyard match and the Funhouse match at WrestleMania, the Money in the Bank match, and now the Stadium Stampede match, which was filmed the night before, which of the 4 was the best pre-filmed thing that you saw so far?
Stadium Stampede. That's no questions asked. There's no doubt in my mind. The other matches were okay. I like how they used Undertaker in the Boneyard. I thought that was good to protect him from his limited, abilities at this point in his career. The Stampede match overall was just fantastic. They had good spots. They incorporated the stadium the right way. It was just, to me, overall, it was just a fun match.
I think, and this is probably the biggest point of all of this, and this is why I think WrestleMania, in my eyes, the worst. I mean, it's not one of those ones I'm going to go back and rewatch ever. And that is because the Stadium Stampede match was indeed a match, whether it's pre-produced, the Boneyard match, the Funhouse match, don't even really know how we can describe those essentially. And, the Money in the Bank match was a match. I would say it was very entertaining. Out of the WWE pre-produced, that was the best, Money in the Bank. But the Stadium Stampede match was a match. There was a clear pinfall. There was stunts. There wasn't special effects, I guess, like there was in some of the other matches where I guess Money in the Bank was one of the cleanest. But the Funhouse match and the Boneyard match, they were cinematic. I mean, they were definitely cut and edited kind of matches. The Stadium Stampede match just felt like a match. Just felt like more what we saw with Mick Foley and Rock back in the day in that empty arena match.
I was just gonna say that. That's exactly how it felt to me. It was just fun. I mean, there was good spots, and then at the end, the finish of the Stadium Stampede was the best part. You couldn't end a match or a pay-per-view in a better fashion.
So AEW stealing a book out of WWE's playbook, or a page out of WWE's playbook. I guess bringing it full circle, because it was Jim Ross, who back in 1998, I think it was January of 1998, was at ringside calling the thing that probably took the WWF at that time into the stratosphere when it comes to media coverage. Stone Cold, Tyson, the big brawl in the ring. Not so much this time around when it comes to the publicity, but Tyson, Jericho, Dynamite ends kind of the same way as an homage to that famous Monday Night Raw episode where Austin and Tyson went at it. What do you want to see Tyson do? He brought some friends with him. Do you think he's good for a one-on-one match? We've really never seen that in WWE or AEW. Do you want to see him in a match with his buddies? I think Vito Belfort was with him.
Henry Cejudo there too. I saw Henry there too. I mean, in a match setting,
what do you want to see Tyson? What is the point here? I guess.
I mean, it's publicity. I mean, I don't think it's going to be it won't be a traditional match by any sense. We know Tyson's not a wrestler. He's a boxer. He's a fighter. I mean, maybe they do some sort of knockout contest. I don't know. AEW will come up with something pretty smart. I don't know what they'll do with him. I mean, he wants
to get back in the boxing ring. And it's kind of strange, obviously, like we alluded to in the teaser to start the show. I mean, HBO Max, the brand new HBO streaming service, has sponsored AEW. You got Tyson involved. Obviously, HBO is synonymous with their history of putting on boxing fights. And, I don't know necessarily if a pay-per-view for Mike Tyson would sell like it did back in the 80s and 90s, but maybe something with a AEW, HBO, Mike Tyson mix, maybe like a Brawl for All style, even though we talk about how awful that was. But I guess in the sense of it was awful because it was wrestlers. This sense, it's an actual boxer. So it's kind of saving the boxer from being in a legitimate contest where it has more of that. Remember the celebrity boxing back in the day where it has the entertainment value, it has the real boxing, but it also has the, maybe Tyson's wearing the padded helmet this time around, kind of not going 100% kind of thing.
Here's what I'll say to that. It was funny because Chris Jericho, he was like, he threw back a decade. He's like, yeah, on a certain Monday night, back, on a particular show, blah, 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 you knocked me out. I want an apology. I thought they sold it well. I just don't know how they're going to use Mike. I mean, Mike's in his 50s now. He looks like he's in the best shape of his life. But, I don't
know about that. I mean, he looks good for being in his 50s. I don't know if he looks – because, in 1988, he looked like he was in the best shape of his life.
I think he's more jacked than he's ever been. I really say that. I mean, I grew up watching Mike Tyson. I mean, I'm a boxing fan. I mean, the sport's different than what it was back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It's a little different. I think the heavyweight division's a little – it's a little bit I mean, Wilder's good, Fury's good, but I loved what Tyson did all those years, and I just don't know what they're going to do with him. It's intriguing. I will say this, kind of move away from Tyson for a second. One of the guys that was with him just recently retired from UFC, Henry Cejudo. Now, people are speculating that, is he going to be in a match? I don't see it at all. I think what he is doing is he is trying to make more money off of Dana White and UFC. I think it's a strategy. It's a contract ploy. He retired. He relinquished the belt. I think it's all about money for Cejudo. So that's people were getting all crazy, like, oh my God, Henry Cejudo's in AEW. Yeah, he showed up on a show, but I think he's using it to ploy in his contract with Dana White to up the money so he makes more money. I mean, can you blame him?
No, I mean, I think it's similar to what we've seen UFC guys in WWE before. We've seen entourages, and I mean, we obviously saw Cain Velasquez in WWE last all about 45 seconds.
Yep.
But moving on, let's talk Brian Cage. He was the mystery competitor in the Casino Ladder match. He comes over from Impact Wrestling. He was teaming up. I think he might. I remember seeing him with Moose. I think back in the day, and back in the day, I mean a couple months ago. Is there anyone else you would have rather seen, let's say, from Impact Wrestling? And obviously, we just saw Impact Wrestling pick up a former WWE diva that was recently released. Is there anyone that you can think of? Let's start here. That would show up in Impact Wrestling from the WWE's recently released pile that might get you interested in watching them in Impact?
Not really. I mean, those guys got released for a reason. They're not being utilized the right way. Yes, that's the first thing. But nobody really bought in behind the characters. I don't know. That's not going to make me go, hey, let me go watch Impact because, I don't know, we'll throw a name out there. Who's in there right now? Is Zack Ryder doing it now? Is Zack Ryder over there yet or no? What's he doing?
He's not in over there.
That's the only guy I can think of that it was released.
It was a female Paluzzo who her name starts with a D. It's
Deonna Purrazzo.
Yeah, Palazzo. She's over in Impact Wrestling now. She made her debut on Tuesday night. But yeah, I mean, there's not really anybody I could think that I'd want from WWE to come over to Impact. Brian Cage, to be honest with you, I'm really excited to see him. I'm excited to see him get a shot. He's maybe not the person I would want to see from Impact mostly to come over to AEW, but I kind of want the other ones to still keep some talent because it keeps things fresh. We learned about this a long time ago about competition and that you don't want to just deplete the pool. And even if we don't watch a lot of Impact Wrestling and we don't maybe watch a lot of Ring of Honor anymore because of the fact that you have AEW, I still want Ring of Honors to have maybe the Jay Lethals, the Dalton Castles, because it's nice to keep them fresh and to keep them kind of hot in case the day they ever do jump over ship to WWE or AEW. And it also keeps it fresh so you have, the bargaining chip in case of maybe Ring of Honor, wants to pick up somebody that's not getting a chance in AEW. You do kind of a trade situation. You just essentially don't want one company. You don't want really two companies. You want as many companies as you can. So it's good to see that there's the NWA Powers. There's still the Ring of Honor. There's still the New Japans because it's keeping people like, the Marty Scurlls of the world fresh. Because think about it. If AJ Styles didn't sit over there in Impact, even after or New Japan and all these other places, I mean, we really wouldn't have cared to see him that much when he came to WWE. If they brought him in years and years prior, if he didn't make a name for himself somewhere else, we wouldn't really care to see Kenny Omega if he didn't make a name for himself in New Japan. So let them keep kind of building their characters, doing their thing so that we would care. That's kind of the problem I have with Brian Cage is he's one of those persons, I guess, I can't wait to see what he's going to do in AEW. But he wasn't somebody who I thought was stagnating in AEW. I'm not 100% sold on his character yet. With Taz, a lot of people are just looking at it as discount Brock Lesnar, discount Paul Heyman. But, I mean, we'll see what he can do. Darby Allin did not win the match, so it looks like that Fyter Fest is going to kind of be similar to what we just saw with Big Guy versus Big Guy with Entourage, Taz, versus Brawler, Jon Moxley.
I'll say this. I wouldn't discount or discredit the Brian Cage Taz alliance. I think it's a good thing because Taz, we all know, is the suplex machine. We know he's one of the better technicians in the last 30 years, to be honest with you. So I wasn't as familiar with Brian Cage. Like I had to go back. Like I saw him. He has his look. He looks pretty. He's jacked. He put on a good show at the pay-per-view this past weekend. I didn't really know him that well. You know him more than I do. But I went back and watched some of his stuff and read up about him. I'm like, this guy's pretty good. I mean, I think it's a good get for AEW. At first, I was like, I've heard of this guy, but I'm not like totally know him. So it was cool. I thought it was different. I mean, jokingly speaking, how about a Ken Shamrock? Totally kidding. But Ken Shamrock is like what? He's like 60. He can still go, right?
I think it might have been a little more excited for Brian Cage in the actual event that it was a super surprise. It wasn't a free agent that we were well aware that was a free agent. I wasn't aware that he was even a free agent. But I would say if I had my pick of the litter of Impact Wrestling specifically, I'd probably take Sami Callihan. That would have been a super addition to AEW. If I had pick of Ring of Honor, it would probably be Dalton Castle. New Japan and Ring of Honor or NWA Power. I forget where Marty Scurll, he's all over the road, but Marty Scurll be a big name. But like I said, I like seeing them where they are because I want to keep seeing them get up so that when Sami Callihan comes over to AEW, it is kind of a big moment like we saw with the Revival.
I'll say this. I think another guy that I would throw in there based on his history, not only here in Syracuse, but as a wrestler, Moose. Moose, a lot of people don't know this. Moose was a offensive lineman for the Syracuse University. He got his degree here from Syracuse, many years back, and then he's earned his stripes, in the wrestling business the last handful of years. He's the kind of guy that a lot of people have said WWE or now AEW. I would love to see him in AEW. I think it would be a good fit. I don't think he's going to WWE. I think guys like him, Marty Scurll, Sami Callihan, those guys they're going to be coming to AEW. They're not going to WWE. I don't see it. I mean, Marty Scurll is one of the best wrestlers in the world. And if you go back and listen to, I believe it was Jericho's podcast within the last week or two, Lance Archer said that Marty Scurll, the match with him and Marty Scurll, put him on the map. If it wasn't for Marty's match with Lance wouldn't be in AEW. That's how much respect Marty has in the industry. Let's be honest. He's a great wrestler. He's been around he's still young, but he's been around long enough. People know who he is, and he's a name to look out for. I don't know what his contract status is, but I believe he's still in Japan. I think they locked him up for a little bit. So I mean, there's still like that working relationship, I think, with AEW and New Japan.
NWA Power, Marty Scurll. He made his debut in NWA Power all right before this happened, going after Nick Aldis and the champion.
Because I know he was still doing Japan too. Because I remember Lance Archer talking about it on Jericho's podcast, I think a week or two ago. I mean, Marty's one of those guys where he could have gone to WWE, but he said, "No, I'm good." More power to him.
So the final thing that happened, I guess, in the world of wrestling this week, outside of AEW, we move on to WWE, and we're not even really going to move over to Raw. We'll just talk right to NXT, and that was the Timothy Thatcher versus Matt Riddle cage match. Speaking of, you just mentioned Ken Shamrock a few minutes ago. It reminded me of those. What were the name? It was the dungeon matches that they had. I think at like SummerSlam '98, and there was another pay-per-view. Ken Shamrock was involved in the UFC style, WWE style cage match. I guess it was their WWE's take on UFC.
It was the Lion's Den, is what it was called.
Lion's Den match. That's it. Yes.
And it's funny. I did that on purpose when I jokingly put Ken Shamrock in there because I knew we were going to get into Riddle and Thatcher because I remember that match. SummerSlam '98, if I'm not mistaken, it was in NYC, and Shamrock won that match. And it's the setup of that cage was very reminiscent for sure. It was fun watching Riddle and Thatcher. I thought it was a good match. They sold Thatcher losing his teeth. I thought that was cool. I will say this: it makes Thatcher look really good, going forward for NXT. I will say this: I've been reading reports that Matt Riddle will be making his debut on Friday Night SmackDown this week, so he's getting the official call up, and is supposedly rumored to be having a storyline with King Corbin. What are your thoughts on that?
I think right now it's sad for anyone to get called up because I want to see them still because I feel like a lot of NXT stars are just kind of wasted once they get put on SmackDown or Raw, and I would like to see live crowds return, so maybe I can go see Matt Riddle in an NXT environment prior to his call-up, because what we saw on Wednesday night was great. I mean, the only thing we're talking about WWE this week is NXT. Raw existed, SmackDown existed. On Raw, they put up the hockey-style glass. Now, do you think the hockey-style glass, if we could jump for a second, was put in there, obviously, with the NXT fans, if you will, AEW style, but do you think it was put in there for a safety measure, meaning like outside of AEW using the extra AEW talent? Do you think WWE is just trying to be extra precautious if they were going to bring people in? Or do you think they wanted to try something different with the whole, you can bang on the glass and make louder noise, make it even louder than that?
I think it's the last part. I think it's the latter. I think also because having that glass up, you can't say exactly, oh, they copied AEW. They did it a little differently. I mean, it has a different touch to it, but I think that's part of it. I think it's for the noise purpose. Now, I do want to hit on something really quick on Raw. We were just talking about NXT and guys getting called up and kind of getting stale. Apollo Crews is one of those guys that's been stale for the last handful of years. And I think he got pushed up too early back in, 2016. So it's good to see, reportedly, he's getting a quote-unquote second chance for management, and he got pushed into the title picture, got the title, and he won it on Monday Night Raw this past week. So I know Raw and SmackDown haven't really been on the top of the list of what we've really been paying attention to because it's just kind of been a snoozer. But what are your thoughts on Apollo Crews being the United States champion? Do you like it?
I like it if it means a good storyline for Apollo Crews. That's what everything is. What Vince Russo, your favorite guy, always said is these titles are props. They just kind of push storylines further, and if it can push a good storyline with Apollo Crews, maybe with Rey Mysterio and other U.S. title contenders, then I would be all about Apollo Crews. I want to see some good matches. It is the Intercontinental Championship of Monday Night Raw. It is essentially, if this was WWF Raw, the video game for Super Nintendo, this would mean now he's in line for a championship shot.
Yep.
Because that's what it is. I mean, it's the precursor to the championship. So hopefully if he gets some sort of push like that, a good storyline with a top-level contender, yes. But if he's still meddling around at the bottom, taking on lower-level guys who really aren't U.S. championship contenders, then not interested.
Yeah, I think a good program would be maybe throw an Angel Garza in there at some point. I think Angel Garza is one of the newer characters that's done. He's done pretty well with what he's been dealt. He's got this like Rico Suave kind of like, flirting with Charlie Caruso. He's just kind of like, and he made that in ring. He compared, being with a woman and being in the ring with somebody. It was, I don't know if you saw it, but you got to go back and check it out. It's very interesting the way this man thinks. I think he's taken advantage of it. One last piece on Raw that, I have to ask you about. With the Monday Night Messiah, Seth Rollins, having Buddy Murphy is, he's got him. What do you think of Austin Theory being paired being paired with Seth Rollins? I personally love it. I think it's going to make Austin Theory even better going forward because he's so young.
I wish it was Austin Aries. I really do.
I get too confused.
And here's my thing with anything, and this is kind of why I can't watch Raw, I can't watch SmackDown. I just kind of get the gist of the things, is because you say it's going to push Austin Theory further, but nothing's really pushing anyone further until we get crowds back in the arenas to decide who we like, who we don't like, because right now it's just WWE trying to decide who we like and who we don't like. And that doesn't really work out that well. It never has. So I think once we get crowds in the arenas and we actually get some either boos or cheers or some sort of reaction behind Seth Rollins, his Monday Night Messiah group, Austin Theory, because Austin Theory, remember, he made his debut at WrestleMania. He never really got to wrestle in front of a large crowd since his call-up, I guess. So I want to actually see how a crowd of 15 to 20,000 people actually responds to Austin Theory, and then how that dynamic works. Before I want to say I'm excited for him, not excited for him, can't wait to see what happens.
I'll be honest with you. I think the savvy wrestling fans I think they'll understand where I'm coming from with it, because Austin Theory is so young, and he's got all the talent in the world. Like, he has the makings of being one of the better wrestlers. We're gonna look at him maybe 10 years from now, and he could be the AJ Styles of wrestling. I'm not trying to put him on that part yet, but I think he has the chance to do that. And working with a guy like Seth Rollins, who's a proven commodity, he can play the heel and the face better than most. I would say probably he's better. I think Seth Rollins is better as a heel than a face, but he's very versatile and he can do both. So maybe he can learn from Seth Rollins and become even better than maybe he thought he could be.
All right. We're going to wrap up this week's edition of the show. Just a quick little thing I learned in my vault back into watching the WWE Network. In the middle of 1999, I see a lot of the jobbers and Shane McMahon even wearing a shirt that said that WWF Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas, Nevada. So I knew nothing about this at all. So I had to go do some research. And I found out that WWE in 1999, or WWF in 1999, bought a vacant casino property in Las Vegas for $10 million. They had the idea that there was going to be a Sable-branded lingerie store, an Undertaker-style tattoo parlor, poker chips with Stone Cold Steve Austin on them. Unfortunately, it was like a $100 million project that never went forward. A couple months later, they sold the property for $11 million. So regardless, they made $1 million on the deal. Yeah. And it was about a year later that WWF New York opened up. But I think that's just one of those weird things that just kind of flies under the radar. Never even knew WWF, before WWF New York, their goal was to buy a casino resort. I think, obviously, we saw WWF New York fail over time. So I think even if it opened up, I would have never seen it, because by the time I ever went to Las Vegas, it'd have been long gone. Things in Las Vegas are always long gone, especially if it was a WWF branded thing.
Let me ask you this: Did you ever get to WWF New York?
I did. I got to WWF New York in 2001, and I'm glad I did. It was a fight with my family. It was our family vacation to New York City, and I really wanted to go to WWF New York for dinner. My dad was like, hey, let's make a compromise. Let's go to ESPN Sports Zone, because I don't really like wrestling, speaking for him. And you like sports, I like sports. That's kind of a compromise, ESPN Sports Zone. But I was adamant. I said, no, I want to go to WWF New York, because in ninth grade, as much as I love sports, I turned to wrestling, and there was like nothing more important. Football, basketball, nothing more at the time than wrestling. Went to WWF New York, and I made sure I took some napkins and some sugar packets and some other branded things that said WWF New York on them. And I'm glad I did that. Even though ESPN Sports Zone Grill no longer exists in Times Square, I feel that I'm glad that I got to go to WWF New York, because now it doesn't exist. Now, if it still existed and ESPN Sports Zone didn't exist, maybe I'd feel the other way. But now that it doesn't exist, I'm glad I fought for that.
And last part of that, do you still have those souvenirs?
Somewhere I do, in a box, yeah, that it's like a napkin and a sugar packet, that the sugar is very hard in it and might be cracked open. But it says WWF New York on them. If I can find them, try to throw them up on eBay or something like that. I wish I could have went for a pay-per-view. I was there the night they played a SmackDown. But either way, I mean, it was definitely a cool place, but if you go there and you go to any places that are themed like that, you can obviously tell that they're not going to last forever.
No, for sure. I mean, I never got a chance to get down there. And fun fact about me, the closest I've ever been to New York City and in Times Square is Yankee Stadium. I went to New Yankee Stadium. I literally got off the bus, walked to the stadium, got back on the bus, went home. That's the closest
that's not really like
New
York City at all. To anyone who actually lives in New York City, that's closer than being in New Jersey, but that's still not. To be in New York City, you got to be right smack dab right in the middle of it. It's like saying the closest I got to going to AT&T Stadium in Cowboys land was I went to the Texas Ranger Stadium next door. You're like, it's close, you can see it, but unless you're actually in there with 100,000 people, it's not the same thing.
That's why I always tell people, I'm like, I've never been really been in New York City because I never walked in Times Square. So
you actually get out of the subway. When my very first trip to New York City, we took a train from Syracuse there, so I couldn't even see out the window the whole way down. I couldn't tell, in front of us what was coming up. I couldn't see buildings. I couldn't see anything. We got off the train at Penn Station. Again, now we're off the train. We're underground. We're in a subway station. It's very busy, but again, I'm underground New York City. Still haven't seen anything. I mean, other than a bunch of people at Penn Station. I walk up the steps. And literally, if you're familiar where Penn Station is, it's right under Madison Square Garden. Yeah. So I walk up the steps, and my first experience was Madison Square Garden right in my face. Billboard for, I think, Joey Harrington, who was an Oregon player at the time. He was promoting Nike or something. There was a 70-foot banner for Joey Harrington supporting Nike or something, and buildings higher than I could ever see in my life, like all in one shot. It was crazy.
I bet you your face, your jaw probably went right to the floor.
Yeah, and probably the most important fact, other than going to WWF New York that weekend or doing any of that stuff, is I went to the World Trade Center, and this is a trip that took place 2 weeks prior to September 11th. We were there the last week before school year started in August, and we went to the World Trade Center. I remember thinking it was an amazing building, but obviously 2 weeks later, as things unfolded, it was pretty crazy to think that I was there just 2 weeks earlier.
That's I never knew that until now. That's insane. I mean, you got to check it out before the tragic events happen. So you see old movies and you see the towers in the background of these old 90s movies, and you're like, man, it's not there anymore. And you think of what happened.
Especially as a kid for the first time in New York City. Empire State Building's really cool and stuff, but they were massive because not just they were the tallest buildings, but their circumference. There's lots of tall buildings, and the Empire State Building is really tall. But the World Trade Center, I mean, their footprint, it was like each of them was like a stadium. Each of them was like an arena. I would probably say you're very familiar with the Carrier Dome. I would probably say the circumference of each tower was a Carrier Dome. So walking around each tower was like these massive buildings. It'd probably take you 20 minutes to walk around the whole thing.
Wow, that's insane.
Well, then they're 110 stories tall, but then when you go in, I mean, they're like going into the mall.
Man, I still can't believe you were there 2 weeks before, man. That's I never knew that till now. That's crazy.
So, all right, well, a little fun outside of wrestling stuff here, but all going back to that WWF casino that never happened. Watching old Raws and pay-per-views. We'll figure out what else I can find and maybe find some things that might be good topics for the next season of Dark Side of the Ring. I actually have a few of those and a few things that I never even knew about, but we'll save those for future episodes. And you have a list of your favorite heels and faces in the business that you want to bring to the table. We'll talk about that next week, as well as leading up to Backlash and where wrestling stands as the pandemic starts to slow down and we start to ink towards maybe getting fans in arenas again. But until then, this has been for Icebreaker 21 and myself, K-Rock Jared, the Heel to the Face podcast. Thank you for wasting a good 30-plus minutes with us. We will see you next week.